Hey YouTubers, Troshin Beamer here. Had the bike 3 weeks now, and believe it or not, it's literally only just done 150 miles. The first sort of week to 10 days, the weather was dreadful, and the second week I was too ill to ride the bike, and then I've been to work, and this is the first day I've actually been able to do a journey on the bike. So we're just going to do a journey 30-40 miles just to basically get a feel for it. It's like I say, I owned the R1200 before this, and it's so similar in so many ways that it's not like having to get used to a new bike. Even in the short distance that I have ridden it, there are noticeable differences between, you know, anyone who says the 1200 and the 1250, you know, that the new shift cam motor, there aren't really any noticeable differences. I just don't know where they're coming from, because it is a very, very different beast in the way that the power is delivered. It's definitely smoother. It pulls from much lower down than the old 1200 LC used to, and it's just generally a nicer machine. Now, maybe part of the smoothness and that is the fact that this is a brand new machine, but the bike that I got rid of was only had 20,000 miles on, so it wasn't exactly a junker. There are a few things I have noticed about the new machine that are a little bit disconcerting compared with the old one. I'm just going to lift my helmet up actually. The new suspension, great that you don't have to manually set it for 1 up or 2 up, but I find in road mode, there's basically road and dynamic are the main settings for it. I find that in road mode it just seems too underdamped for me. Yeah, it's very comfortable, but go down a bumpy road and you end up seasick. It just seems to, it never feels unsafe, but it doesn't feel as tight and as planted as the old version used to. Having said that, put it in dynamic mode, which I have it in at the moment, and it just feels great. I mean, I love it. But it'll be interesting to see when the temperature creeps up a little bit and my wife comes out on the back, whether the road mode feels any less any less underdamped with 2 people up, you know, whether it alters it in any way. Another thing I've noticed, and it could just be me, is getting the bike on and off the centre stand. I don't know whether they've altered the length of the centre stand or the pivot point or whatever, but it just seems much harder to get off the centre stand than the old bike did. Whether that's just me or whether they have altered it in some way, I don't know. Now, I mean, getting off the subject there, if you notice there, I was hardly moving in 3rd gear, just open it up. Alright, it chugged a little bit, but nothing to the extent that the old non-shift cam motor would have done. This is a very different beast. It's way more tractable. I'm just going to get here so we can actually, I think it'll be the first time the thing's actually been above 4th gear once we get onto this bit of dual carriageway here coming up, and then we can start to stretch our legs a little bit, give it a little bit of a journey, see how it feels. While I was sitting here, actually, I just pointed out the new Nav 6 is a vast improvement on the Nav 5 from the point of view of readability, and I do have one Analytic shield on there that just makes it a little bit more readable. I've also fitted an electronic lock for these that's tied into the central locking to prevent the Sat-Nav button being pushed, which I'll go into in more detail later. Let's just get on the road. with the screen up, I mean 70 mile an hour, you're just in a bubble of calm. You might as well be doing 30 miles an hour, to be honest. It's what the RT is made for, just crossing continents. But that doesn't mean to say it's like a big barge of a boat like the K1600. But it's still pretty nimble, and if you want to chuck it around you can. You may well have noticed, obviously not using the clutch, the gear changing. Got the gear shift assist pro. Had it on the previous version, but it has definitely improved in the 5 years. Whether they've tweaked the software or whatever, I don't know, but it's definitely better than the old gear shift assist pro, the version 1, and particularly on down changes, it's a lot better. Although apparently this new model, the 1250, is a few kilograms heavier than the outgoing model. If anything, it actually feels a bit lighter. Whether that's carrying the weight lower down or whether it's something to do with the suspension, I don't know. But it definitely feels a bit lighter than the outgoing model. I'm just going to pop this onto the use a little whiz wheel here to change the suspension to road, which is softer, and just see what sort of difference it makes on a bumpy road like this. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. It does seem slightly more comfortable, but at the expense of whether it's at the expense of handling it, at the expense of my confidence in the handling, in that it just seems very bouncy. It's a bit like riding a pogo stick when you got it in road mode. I believe you can adjust the you can change the damping as a different, even when you're in this mode you can have high, low, or minimum, max, whatever that is. But I haven't really had a chance to play around with it yet, so I am literally just leaving it on auto. And like I say, the road mode auto does seem just way underdamped. Whereas slip it into dynamic and it suddenly feels so much more crisp and tight, and more confidence inspiring, or certainly from my point of view anyway. I must admit, I don't like a bike that feels like it's wobbling around underneath it. I do like to have some feedback. I mentioned earlier the Sat-Nav Lock. I don't know if you're aware of what I think has been a big omission on the Sat-Nav, and that's a simple push of the button. Anyone can take your Sat-Nav, but observe, that button can no longer be pushed, and it's all linked to the central locking via a very clever little piece of kit made by a guy in Slovenia. a company called Old Timers, which is probably fairly appropriate for us BMW owners, but it works a treat. You ain't got to worry about taking the sat-nav off the machine every time you stop for petrol or a piss or whatever. Costs about 150 quid, easy to fit, you do it yourself in 20 minutes and works a treat. Solution to a problem that should never have existed. I have had people ask me, several people have asked me why I've got the smaller BMW top box on the machine, and if you look at the mirrors you will see why. Yes, I use the large 49 litre top box when my wife and I are on tour in 2-up, but for everyday use I don't need that carrying capacity, and the smaller top box does give you an uninterrupted view in the rear view mirrors, which is not the case with the larger one. You lose half your mirrors with a flipping top box. In fact, the majority of the time I don't even have the panniers on, I literally just have the small top box. I mean, how many sandwiches can one man eat in a day? Be unbelievably lazy and put the cruise control on, shall we? Fourth gear, cruise control on. Easy to keep to the 30 limit. Whereas with the older RT, fourth gear, it'd have been chugging it on up hills at 30. The slightest incline and you'd go down to third gear so you didn't have to labour the engine, but this seems to just take it in its stride. Certainly BMW engineers certainly seem to have hit on something with this shift cam technology. Let's just hope the longevity is okay. Another thing with the shift cam motor seems to have done is, and I'm assuming it's the shift cam motor rather than anything else, is reduce the vibration, particularly through the bars. I mean, I used to be very prone to numbness in my fingers, particularly on my left hand. That doesn't seem to be an issue with the new machine. It does seem to be a lot smoother. Yeah, there's some vibration there at lower revs, but for God's sake, it's a twin. If I wanted a dead smooth motor, I'd have bought a 6 or a 4. God, this thing does pull so nicely. I'm keeping the revs down at the moment. Obviously it's a very new engine and I don't want to I want to run the thing in properly, but this thing just wants to go. Yeah, so sort of early impressions. Basically it's the new R1250RT is the old R1200RT, but just that little bit better in so many ways. Is it worth the upgrade? is anything. It really depends, A, on whether you what your finances are, and B, how old your RT is. But if you're wavering, I would say don't take the 1250RT out for a test drive, because you probably will end up losing some money out of your bank account.